Welcome back to the podcast. This week's episode is sponsored by MPB. So this week we have got an incredibly special guest, not just Rob sat next to me, but we've also got the lovely Karl Taylor. Now, Rob, have you, I'm sure it sounds like a stupid question, have you ever watched a Karl Taylor video?
Everybody has watched a Karl Taylor video.
Everybody has watched a Karl Taylor video.
A living legend.
Yes, quite. And I mean, I can't say he was the first YouTuber I ever watched because I genuinely don't know, but he was definitely one of the first YouTubers I watched regularly.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, when it comes to like how to light something, that's probably, I can't think of what else I would have seen. There's not a great deal around now, but like there definitely wasn't back then.
No, absolutely not.
And Karl and I have had a chat before the filming of the interview. And I didn't realise how long he's been doing it for. He's been doing it since pre-internet days. He was sending out DVDs or DVDs in the post. Way back when.
That 90s life, that was.
Yeah, I know. Amazing. So we've got an interview with Karl. I mean, I don't really know what else to say apart from we've got an interview with Karl. Very, very grateful for his time. I'm just going to dive right into it because it's better listening to him than it is listening to us right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm sure you all saw this coming. Karl is obviously an avid Hasselblad shooter. And for the price, and I like to compare it to the latest and greatest, I'm sure we can all assume that the Canon R5 Mark II is kind of the go-to at the moment. That's $4,500. $4,500. You could get one of these beautiful backs here, the 907X, or the special edition version, which is cosmetic, I believe. But this here, you can bang onto a 500cm Hasselblad, which will probably cost you another $1,000, and you could probably get a lens like an 80mm prime for the same price and have a beautiful bit of chrome plated. Look at this. That's what you're after. Hasselblad-y goodness. Like, there's a lot to be said for that. But here's the sensible money. Here's what I would be doing if I was about to dive into Hasselblad. We'd get the H6D50, which is obviously is more than the R5, but let's be honest, it's a lot more camera. 16-bit color depth. That's the headline here for the dynamic range and the colors it has available for it. CMOS sensor, beautiful bit of kit, completely modular. There's a whole load of accessories. And then the lenses. This is what I thought I was going to trip up on. I remember Hasselblad lenses being insanely expensive. And yes, they ain't cheap. But look at this, the 35mm. If you're a landscape person, this lens here, £430. It is an amazing lens. The Hasselblad macro lens, amazing lens. Even the 80mm, which is kind of your nifty 50, 480 quid. Can't really complain with that. You can get into the Hasselblad system for a fraction of what it once cost. I reckon what here, $5,500, $7,000, you've got a full setup. If we just jump back here, because what I like to do is, obviously, he shoots Hasselblad. The opposite brand, the opposing brand, is Mamiya Leaf and Phase 1, which are kind of one and the same. One bought the other out. Obviously, we're not going to be here. Even that, $15,000. I know, it's $15,000. It's not cheap, but that's a lot of camera. But what we're looking for here is the bargain. Do they have P45 Plus? We shot this for ad campaigns for years. When I looked at getting into one of these, for this, a body and two lenses was $10,000 secondhand. Look at this, £850. Absolute bargain. Now, it's a good job I'm not a hobbyist digital photographer because I would be rinsing this. Look at this. You get the camera body for 150 quid. Bargain. You could get a P25. Have they got one of those? P25 Plus? P25. Hasselblad fits. They've always got stock coming in though. The Mamiya Leaf, these fit on them as well. These are lovely sensors, really beautiful colours. It's a shame they went under. But even modern stuff, IQ180, 80 megapixel IQ1. You know, this is a great bit of kit, especially for studio photographers. It's a bit before medium format had high ISO. Not many specs on here at the moment, but you get the gist. It's a medium format camera. Look at the size of this. Look at that sensor. Beautiful. And unlike if you're going to look at a 1DX that's had this much use, it'd be battered. But medium format cameras, because they're so expensive, they don't tend to get battered. They also tend to be often studio cameras. And the worst case scenario is always in the hands of an assistant. And what would I go through here? I'd probably go for the P45 Plus, to be honest. I put it on a Phase 645 DF. We're looking at what, £1,500, and we'll go and get some lenses, because obviously lenses are what you do need. So let's go for Phase 1 Mamiya lenses. Now these Blue Ring here, this is what we rent on jobs. These are insane lenses, insane, but we can't afford them, not even secondhand. But if we head down here, let me tell you what I have used. The 35-35, that's a good lens. The 55 is a good lens. The 120 macro though, there it is, right in the middle obviously. Manual focus, £300. This is one of the nicest lenses I've ever used. We always rent the Blue Ring one for commercial jobs, but we used to use this one in the studio because we can't afford the Blue Ring one. I'm not sure I can tell the difference, to be honest. And for £2,500 to £300, I'd be willing to take that risk. So there we go. A great selection. Kit lens here, £150. Can't complain. Just get in on it.
Super. So thanks for joining us, Karl. How's it going over there?
Thank you. It's going well. I'm sure you experienced the recent storm that we've just experienced as well. I don't know how bad you had it in the Midlands there, but we had it
mild. Was it
mild,
bad there?
really?
Yeah.
We had it pretty well. We had it worse than expected here, because I think it was meant to hit Wales and Cornwall the worst, but it actually hit the Channel Islands quite severely as well. So there were a few trees down and, bits and bobs and missing off houses and stuff.
Oh, I think we had like a fence panel down, yeah. Yeah, we did not get that joy. Good. And so for those who don't know, whereabouts are you based?
I'm in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, which are a group of islands very close to the Normandy coastline of France. To give you a very, very brief history, the Channel Islands of Guernsey, Jersey, Alderney, Sark, etc., used to belong to Normandy when Normandy was a separate country from France. And then when Normandy invaded and took over England, the Channel Islands grew their associations and allegiances to the UK or England. And then France took over Normandy. And then the Channel Islands were left as a sort of British outpost, if you like. So even though geographically we're very close to France, politically we're associated more with Britain, although there is a lot of obviously strong French heritage and culture that still exists here.
So did you get the good French food and or is it still British food?
Yeah.
All the perks. Yeah. Oh, lovely. Yeah. So are you from there? I'm sure I've asked you this before. Were you born and raised there? Have you always lived there, or have you?
Yeah. So my father is a true Gurn, as you call it, like with the family going back many generations. And my mother is from Austria, and she moved here after the war as a young child, and then she grew up here, but she was originally from Vienna. And I was born here. So and then I worked overseas and traveled overseas for many years before coming back here and then setting up my business locally here.
So yeah, I guess a lot of people ask me, they go, oh, I don't live in London or New York or Paris. I live, I don't know, insert name of small town, or like a small island. How did you get into photography? Because it's obviously it wouldn't be the standard London path of going, well, I'll go and sleep on someone's sofa, we'll assist over. What was your, what was your career path to date? Okay, so it's, I used to be very much into art and drawing at school. And very, very sort of art focused. And then when I left school, I worked in interior design back in the day, almost before computer technology, where you have to do everything as drawings by hand, sketches, interior design sketches. And then I was made redundant from that job, probably for my own doing, because I'm not a very good employee. I'm more of a work for myself type person, as I've discovered. I can relate.
Exactly. So then I needed a job, and I took a job in a camera store just by chance. It was actually it was an independent camera store on the high street. Eventually, it became a Jessup store, which no longer exists anymore, but by the by. And it was there that I learnt about cameras, and the staff and the people there taught me about photography and apertures, shutter speeds, and you got to use cameras, and the management were really good because they let you borrow them and take them home at the weekend to help you learn. And they also used to set like weekly challenges for the staff to go out and get a picture of this and this. And I'd never experienced cameras before that. And I think I was only about 17 years old at the time, and I'd never really experienced an SLR camera with detachable lenses and these big zoom lenses, etc. And I was just fascinated by it, absolutely fascinated. And especially coming from a world of art where you spend all this time trying to draw something in great detail, and then of course this instrument could deliver incredible detail instantly. Well, not instantly, it was on film then, but I was just amazed by the technology and what it could do. And I sort of switched my allegiance from art to photography very quickly and became super interested in photography. And then it developed from there, where I decided, right, this is what I want to do. And I was very much interested in cultural photography and reportage, you sort of National Geographic style stuff, journalism. And I did a lot of traveling around the world. Went away for several years, shot images for stock, shot images for magazines, newspaper articles, bits and pieces, freelance, mixed that with backpacking and traveling. And then eventually I was selling more work, but then the whole travel thing, I just got a little bit fed up of the traveling and the working and that side of things. And I ended up actually working in Australia for a while and experiencing working in a studio with all these sort of full-on lighting and big format cameras, and a world that I knew nothing about because I was purely natural light or a little bit of speed light work. And although I was shooting what I considered good work that had been published there, I had no insight or knowledge of commercial studio work at all until that point. And it was another one of those moments where I was like, wow, this is like magic what these guys are doing with light, the way they control light to make something that's relatively boring look amazing. And it was another spark for me. It was another one of those, I want to do this now, you know? So I just really then focused on lighting knowledge, understanding lighting, the tools and everything else. And then I decided eventually when I came back to Guernsey, I think it was the mid to late 90s, to set up my own commercial studio because I felt there was a gap in the market in the Channel Islands. There was a lot of business in the Channel Islands: tourism, hospitality, restaurants, architecture. There's a big offshore finance industry, so there was a lot of business for banks and corporate type stuff as well. And I started up my business, took a big loan out for my first equipment and studio, like you, shooting, you know, the large format 5.4s, medium format RZ 6.7s and stuff. And developed quite a successful business locally in the Channel Islands. And then that led to work in the UK through various connections and agencies, some work in Europe. And then it just kind of grew gradually from there. It wasn't any overnight success, of course, at all. It was a very gradual, you know, paying off your debts, not earning a huge amount of money, getting, you know, the long game to eventual success as your work got better and your work evolved, and you obviously are older and you meet more people, you make more contacts, you work with more agencies. And then later in my career, I was often working in London regularly, going to London to work for a week and then coming back here. So renting studios in London and shooting there and then coming back here. So I've always had my base here in Guernsey. and I've got a studio here. Always had I think I'm on like my 4th or 5th studio now, but always had a studio here. But a lot of my work was in the UK or Europe, etc. And then, after,
yeah, you go. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag on the stream. I think you go for it.
yeah, and then 15 years ago, because I'm 30 years in now on a photography career. 15 years ago, it just happened by chance that we decided to do some education, and that grew a separate business.
And then at which point did you end up on YouTube in that education thing? Did you start with YouTube for education, or was it pre the YouTube days?
It was about the same time. So we made our first photography instruction classes, which were beginner level. Introduction to Photography was the first DVD we released. I think it was in 2009. And we put ourselves on YouTube at the same time, thereabouts, releasing extracts or the odd free chapter from some of our early courses. But that was at a time, as you know, when digital photography was in its infancy. People had just started getting hold of Canon digital and Nikon digital cameras that were about 8 megapixel or 12 megapixel. But the interest in photography went like that at that point. And we were very lucky in that the timing was good for us. I mean, it was partly luck and partly, thought out, because we knew there was this big interest in photography now because of digital. And that's why we decided to try to go mainstream with DVDs, education. And then we also utilized YouTube as a promotional platform to do that. And back then in 2009, there wasn't many other people on YouTube doing photography related things. There was a few people talking about photography, but there wasn't anyone going out and showing you how to do it, which is what we were doing. And that then gave us a pretty good exposure and growth on YouTube back in those years. I mean, obviously, as you know now, with YouTube, everyone is doing it.
We're all here. We've ruined it for everybody. That's interesting, though, because I think 2009 is when I got my first camera. And I taught myself photography on YouTube, which was much easier back then because there was far fewer channels. And I'd have watched your videos. I'd have watched Chase Jarvis's videos, which were back then, it's a very different channel now. It's a whole, I don't know what it is, but back then it was a very useful channel. It was like, and this is how we use a DIT truck on location. And this is how we do, all these like good bits of information. And then I believe I used to also watch Jared Poland's channel because he used to be a music photographer. And that's what I got into at the very start. And it was like education on how to get a press pass, how to get this, how to get that, how to, all these sorts of useful bits of information. So it was very quick to learn photography on YouTube back then, whereas I think today it would take you a long time and you'd have to watch an awful lot of videos to find useful information because...
Absolutely. And you're one of the ones that actually puts out some very useful information from a professional point of view. And I've watched many of your videos as well. And it's interesting because I think part of the problem now is that proliferation of all these people trying to be experts on YouTube when many of them are not. And there's so much false information or misinformation out there. And it's hard to sift through what is right and what is wrong. And you can end up wasting a lot of time learning the wrong things.
That's exactly what I did.
My sentiment on that is that really, because obviously I'm bound to say, yes, look at us, look at what we do. We have a professional platform for education. But if anyone chooses to want to learn from someone else, first of all, I would say check that person's provenance. Check, are they or have they worked as a professional? Have they got a credible portfolio themselves? Because there are so many people giving out advice that have either never done anything, don't have any good work to show for themselves, And I think if that's the situation, you should maybe question the advice they're offering, because the provenance isn't there. And if it's not there, that should probably give you a warning sign as to maybe this person is there for the wrong reasons. They're just trying to get views or whatever. But I mean, it's up to people. People aren't stupid. They can choose who they want to listen to. Some people aren't stupid. They can choose who they want to listen to and learn from. It's entirely up to them. But it's a shame that YouTube and the internet in general has become so populated by so-called experts in all, not just in photography, in all fields, because now YouTube, for many people, is just about getting views. What is going to get me views so I can earn money from either product placement or the views themselves? And what can I say to make that happen? And often the most clickbaity or nonsensical things drive those views when they're actually the least useful information to the viewer itself. And then, of course, we're absorbed amongst all of that noise and nonsense that makes it harder to find the real good stuff, which again is one reason why we focus a professional education platform that's dedicated to education as a standalone thing.
We're not pandering towards clicks.
We're not, no, and I think you're doing a similar thing as well. And it's just, I think people eventually realize that, yes, YouTube can give you some really great information for many things, but sometimes you need to step into a more professional format to get the very best if you really want to learn.
Absolutely. I mean, I see YouTube as an entertainment platform nowadays. I mean, actually, I want to ask you this in a second, but I don't watch photography on YouTube apart from for entertainment. And that might be because of where I'm in my career, but I doubt it because I spend a lot of time learning elsewhere. But I use it as an educational platform. But I also what do you watch on YouTube? Because I bet it's not what people think it is. What's it? Is it all Sabrina Carpenter music videos?
It's funny, but I do actually watch a lot of old music videos, from your youth and stuff.
Yeah,
but
same.
The main thing I watch on YouTube is motorcycle blogs and motorcycle videos. So a lot of these motorcyclists that travel around the world on a bike, a little bit like Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman do on those TV programs. Similar things to that, but it's very much more, daily diary camera type stuff. And then I also watch a lot of track day motorcycle racing stuff or engineering tips and things. So I'm just because that's a hobby of mine. Scuba diving, technical diving is also a hobby. So I watch a bit of that on YouTube, but there's not a lot of that on YouTube. And then occasionally I watch some photography videos just to hear different points of view in the industry, sometimes like yours or other people that I know occasionally as well. But that's about it really, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
so. Also, if I need to do a bit of DIY at home and there's something I don't know how to do, DIY videos.
I would say all of my car repairs, I've normally got my phone to one side of the engine bay with a video playing on how to get something out of the way of the car engine whilst I'm doing it at the same time. It's brilliant for that sort of thing. I was going to say, I oddly, out of photography, the majority of what I watch are landscape photography channels, despite the fact I hate taking landscape photos because I haven't got the patience. And I have no interest in ever, but I find for some reason their video format really calming and relaxing. I'm like, this is nice.
Oh, okay, so it's a therapy for you.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name. Someone Heaton. He's got like a little truck he drives around.
It's Thomas Heaton, maybe.
I love watching his videos. I've got no interest in landscape. I don't even like looking at landscape photographs, but for some reason his videos I just find really entertaining and
It's funny that because I do occasionally take landscape pictures for pleasure, for therapeutic reasons. If I've got time or, if I'm away, sometimes I do like to get out with the tripod, the camera, golden hour, shoot some images. But for the same reasons you watch the videos for a therapy, I do that for a therapy.
Yeah.
But I don't enjoy watching landscape videos on YouTube because I actually find them too slow or whatever. But I do enjoy doing landscape occasionally as a therapy because it's so different to my normal studio type stuff.
Yeah, I think I've stopped taking photos outside of work a few years ago without realising it. I used to always take photographs. I have a film camera, and it's got the same roll of film in it that it's had in there for a couple of years now. It still travels around in the car, but it never comes out. Right. But I think I've probably done a bit too much work in the last couple of years, and it's sort of hit burnout points. That's probably why.
Yeah, I mean, you get that. I mean, I've had that many times because I've been in this game for so long now that my desire to take pictures. I mean, I take pictures for pleasure when I'm working. It's still a pleasure and it's a privilege as well. But my desire to take pictures after you've been in the studio working all week or something is far less. And there are times when we go on holiday, you know, the kids and everything, and, you know, I'm just taking snapshots on my phone, not really any intention other than snapshots, really. But occasionally, I still go out and shoot landscapes just when the desire takes me. It's not regularly anymore, but yeah, now and again.
Yeah, so I went on a family holiday a few years ago with some friends and our family, and someone was like, "Have you got your camera with you?" And I was like, "No, I've just finished a 10-day shoot," and it was one of those, you know, those really boring jobs that you're just like. I remember complaining. My girlfriend was like, "For the amount you're getting paid, shut up whinging, go and take the photographs." I was like, "But it's the same photograph 8 times a day for 10 days running. I don't want to do it anymore." She's like, "Shut up and go and do it." I was like, "Okay." Go to this holiday, and I think I took like 3 photos on my phone. Like, but they're always the best paying ones.
Pack shot. Yeah, they can be. Pack shot photography. I've done loads of that years ago. I mean, it's not so much of a thing now because there's so many people set up to do pack shots really quickly and instantly and cheaply that you can't compete. But back 15 years ago, we'd be shooting pack shots of bottles or cosmetics or vitamin tablets or things, and literally we'd have like thousands of products to shoot. Bang, shoot, bang, shoot, bang, shoot, and you know, but that is mind numbing, of course. But like you say, it did pay, but it's not so much of a thing now.
No,
because there are sort of
few years
automated ways.
Yeah, there's these massive studios like 10 quid a shot, and you can't compete with that. But we had it where they wanted like better than pack shots to be used on adverts. It's like we want some really nice hero shots. I was sitting there going, I'm sure a pack shot place could do this like almost as well, but we won't mention that. We'll take the money and run for the hills. But,
we'll take the work.
So going back to through your career, you obviously left your small island, which I guess is similar to living in a small town or maybe a city in a country where there's not a big industry. Could you have had the photographic career, ignoring the education side, that you've had if you hadn't have left?
If I had moved?
If you hadn't have moved, if you hadn't have gone travelling, if you hadn't have moved to London to do the week-long shoots and stuff like that, could you have stayed on your island and had a career with the same success?
I think I could have up until maybe 5 years ago, where I think the industry has now changed a little bit. In terms of back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I was always exceptionally busy, even locally. My rates were less then, so you were more competitive or maybe more attractive. And the business that I had throughout the Channel Islands was sufficient for me to actually, I had an assistant full-time, or I had an administrator doing my admin full-time instead of an assistant. And then another time when we were super busy, I had another photographer, guy called Alex Wallace, who's actually a successful photographer in New Zealand now and a good friend of mine. He worked for me for a few years full-time as a photographer. So I actually had enough business for 2 of us at least to generate the revenue for that. And but I think the market has changed and my prices got more expensive as we sort of evolved and did more work and needed more equipment and more speciality and more expertise. And my work is now sort of outpriced the local market, if you like. So I'm not really available in that sense locally for the type of businesses that are here. So I don't shoot hospitality or architecture or restaurants or general business portraits and corporate photography anymore like I used to. I now focus specifically on high-end product photography for specific clients. And I suppose if I was just completely focused on that, I think, yes, I could probably survive being based here, but I would have had to put a bit more effort in than I'm putting in now. But because of the education business being so successful, I've just let my commercial business do what it does. And that means I service some existing clients that I've worked with for many years, but it's not really my main focus anymore. It's nice to keep my hand in and work on some projects. And I occasionally get some, I just had one yesterday actually from an automotive industry company, an inquiry about some work for them. So I occasionally still get new inquiries in, but mostly it's just servicing some existing long-term clients that I have, because a large part of our focus, the majority part of our focus is on the education side of the business, because that has been successful and that's allowed me to employ, nearly up to a dozen people sometimes. I think we're running on about 8 to 10 at the moment, but that wouldn't have happened without the education business. There's no way I'd need 8 to 10 people running a commercial studio. Would I have been more successful if I was based in London, purely focused on product and advertising photography like Jonathan Knowles or Barry Macario in Manchester? Yes, quite probably I would have, if that was my only goal. But I made the decision not to do that for a couple of reasons. I'd spent a long time traveling around the world away from home, and whilst it was good for some period of time, I did want to come back here. I love being by the ocean. I do a lot of diving, fishing, those sort of things. So the ocean I've got an affinity with. I don't like the hustle bustle of big cities. So even when I was working in London for a week was like my limit. It was like I would literally be clawing my way out of trying to find a way to get out of the place, because I'm not a big city type person. And London, although it's an interesting city, I think it can be quite overwhelming and a little bit depressing. You get into a mindset in the way people work and talk there. Cities I have enjoyed, Sydney, I worked in Sydney, and because it's close to the sea, and Melbourne as well, they're both close to the ocean. So I could kind of see myself living and working and running a commercial studio in one of those cities, because that type of city would have given me a little bit more what I'm kind of used to in terms of a lifestyle. So I made the decision. I just didn't want to work in a place like London or Manchester or wherever, because it wasn't near the ocean. It didn't give me the feeling of freedom that I would want and liked. So I just had to adapt, and I had to make a business work that was partially quite a bit of traveling, but still allowed me to be based here and accept the fact that I might not be at the very top end of the biggest campaign shoots that I could have been at if I was based in London. But I'm very happy with that decision. There's absolutely nothing that I regret in any form. And I would say that the other thing is that I'm quite an entrepreneurial person. I do like business. I like the idea of business and developing new ideas and different business ideas. So the evolution of our education business would probably never have happened had I been based in London. It just wouldn't have happened. And doing what I do in education gives me a certain amount of freedom with photography that I wouldn't have if I was working on huge campaigns for huge agencies weekly, because as you know, you get a little bit more freedom in what you can shoot. You can say, well, next week we're going to shoot this instead, because it's not a commission from a client where you're having to work to a very specific brief and follow the exact layout and the exact mood boards. You can decide the brief yourself. So from a photography point of view, there is a certain amount of freedom that's been gained by what I do and the way I do it. As a matter of fact, I actually became quite depressed in my photography career about 10, 15 years ago, just about when we did start the education business, because I had felt I got into a bit of a rut shooting the same thing all the time. Corporate lawyer, business shots, accountants, bankers for PR reports and annual reports. I remember we did one job in London in one of those big skyscraper towers. I can't remember. It was for a big stockbroker firm, and they must have had like 300 staff or something in this block. And we were there for days, just photographing bloody headshots. And no one wanted their photograph taken. Yeah. They all hate, they hate the photographer. They see you as some like little minion or whatever. And they're far more important than you, according to them. But you've got a very specific brief, a very specific background, a very specific look, and everyone's the same. And there was myself and my fellow assistant colleague with me. And I was just like, what am I doing? This isn't photography. This is just mundane, boring, just pushing a button. I mean, yes, you needed the skill to light it how they wanted it, but it was just repetition. And I had got to a point in my career where, yes, I was making money and the work was coming in, but the type of work had become brain numbing. And I actually came very close to saying, right, I can't do this anymore. But fortunately, it's funny actually, because I nearly emigrated back to Australia. I'm not from Australia, but because I was there, I decided I might go back there, and I actually put in an application to set up a business in Melbourne, and they would give you residency if you were willing to open a business and bring in X amount of cash to do so. They would give you a resident permit. And I went through the application process, and Melbourne was where I actually planned to go. One, because they had a lot of automobile photography being done at the time down there, because there's very good scenery close by with mountains and vineyards. They had a flourishing wine industry, so for bottle wine photography. They had electronics industry, and there was a lot going on there at the time. I don't think so much now, but I actually investigated, very strongly about moving there so that I could get away from doing all this corporate stuff that I wasn't really enjoying. But then that didn't happen, and the education business happened, and the education business gave me a new lease of life to my photography, and my inspiration and love of photography came back again because of it.
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate for that, because a lot of photographers can get in a rut, and when you lose the passion, you may still have the skill, but if you don't have the passion, it's not the same thing, is it? You need to maintain.
And I think I see a lot of photography. It seems to be once they get to about 45, they just lose the passion, and then they stop testing. And when they stop testing, they're not putting new work out, and then the clients start drying up. And before they know it, one, they hated it already, and now they hate it, and the money's going like this. And I'm just like, you need to leave or find some motivation. But you can, it's one or the other.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing as well, find that motivation. And I think you're right as well. That age, possibly that age as well, 40, 45. I'm 55 now, but I still get a huge buzz from what I do. But I might not even be doing what I do if I didn't have the education business. I might have given up, done something else instead, But it's a tough one, because the industry has got tougher, and we've got more external threats with AI and various factors and budgets. The economy's not good at the moment, at this moment in time. So there are many external factors that are making it very difficult for commercial photographers. At some points in the past, commercial photographers were pressurized from this boom in for people wanting to be photographers. That happened when digital photography arose around about 2008 onwards. More people all of a sudden wanted to be photographers. So that put some pressure on your mid-level commercial photographers, not the top end ones, but it certainly put some pressure on the mid-level ones, because all of a sudden a company that might be a local business that said, oh, I need some food photography or some interiors done, and they were your usual customer. Now, oh, my mate John's got a camera now, and so, and so that put commercial pressure on the mid-level, but that's probably fallen away now. And the pressure is from different sources. It's from things like budgets, clients, everyone struggling with the economy and not having the advertising spend that they would have had. And of course, certainly I think for stock images, huge potential pressure and problems with AI, because AI can create essentially stock images just by describing them now. And it's doing so off the back of all of those great photographers' work that it learnt from. And this is a very dangerous and unknown territory at the moment on where that's going to go. However, I do think that the top end commercial will still survive, because I don't think AI will ever deliver what, the very specifics of a brief that often clients require, but they may start using it for bits and bobs shots. So things might become even more specialist and niche at the top end, and the mid end might struggle more. That's possibly what might happen.
Yeah, that's definitely how I've seen it going. Although I can't to make sure I don't say anything I shouldn't say here. One of the photographers who's represented by my agent, who I look after within the agency, lost a job that they'd already shot. So they'd shot it once. They wanted a repeat shoot of the same ad campaign. The ad campaign was an award-winning photo shoot, and they've done the new one in Midjourney instead. They did the scamps in Midjourney, and the client just went, "Yeah, that's good enough."
And they can quite possibly, I don't know the campaign you're talking about, but quite possibly they fed the existing real photography campaign into Midjourney as a learning prompt. Because you can also
this is something we're looking into at the moment, because in our contracts it strictly says none of our work can be used for AI training. So how do we prove?
How can you ever know? Yeah. I see photographers posting work, and you can see they've clearly fed in the style of Irving Penn, in the style of, Annie Leibovitz, or because you can feed famous photographers' images into the AI and say, give me a portrait of a beautiful model on location in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris in the style of lighting or tonal range of this photographer. And that's got to be plagiarism. That has got to be.
I've been using that recently to see whether there's genres of work I could be doing. So, for example, I'll put in my own work and my website and all that, and because my style is very succinct, it knows it must be like this. I'm like, what happens if I shoot wildlife? What does that look like? What happens if I shoot landscapes in my style? And obviously, you can't shoot a landscape in my style, but it's interesting what it comes up with. I'm just like, maybe there's something in that I could be doing, perhaps not with photography, but with another medium. So there's definitely creative uses, but also a lot of plagiarism. I don't understand how it can be policed.
Well, I don't think it can. I mean, we know, Getty have got a huge lawsuit filed against the AI companies. I think it's like $1 billion for potentially lost future revenue, claiming that the AI has learned most of what it knows from Getty's vast libraries and sub-libraries, stock libraries, and it's a valid point. And the AI bots have scoured all of our websites for ideas and image learning, of course. But there's no way we can ever prove it, know it, or anything. It's a tricky one. But I mean, AI is not only going to affect us; it's going to affect music industry, graphic design, filmmaking, CGI artists, and then eventually it's going to chew into architects, accountants, everything.
I'd love to have an AI accountant. Mine drives me mad. I'd love to go into ChatGPT. Here's my receipts.
if you think about it, Scott, and you think about AI, what it's good at words, so it can write words and it can build stories and things. So copywriting is obviously affected there as well. And it's good at making images. Now, why is it? Why is it those two things? Because those are the most popularly available items on the web, images and words. So AI has learnt based on what is most freely available for it to learn on. Okay. But as soon as they decide, okay, AI knows what it's doing now, let's train it on engineering and architecture. Let's feed in to AI so it can learn about weight load bearing, steel reinforced frame load calculations, layouts of rooms, famous architects, design styles and various eras of architecture. AI will be able to learn all of that, and you will be able to say to AI, design me a 6-bedroom house with a balcony in a Miami style Art Deco, boom, 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 boom. And it will give you a creation, and it will likely, if it understands the engineering rules because it's learnt them, it will be able to design you something that would actually be feasible to build and for it to stand up and be load bearing and within regulations. So that will put another creative industry, architecture, at jeopardy as well. And the only reason it's probably not as advanced on that at the moment is because so far AI has been learning just on what's freely available, which is the web, which is words and images. That's my opinion. Soon as they can direct AI to say, well, let's go more specialist, let's focus on that topic now. And of course, it's already doing it with certain niches like medical imaging and things like that. But we're not going to be the only ones affected here, is what I'm getting at. I think we're the first ones that are affected. Yeah. Music production is another good example. But we are not going to be the only ones. There is going to be a huge industrial revolution and transition that's going to take place. And in my opinion, as a business person, it's the transition that's the difficult part. Because you may end up, if we haven't all destroyed ourselves with nuclear war or global warming or whatever atrocity, we may end up in 50 years from now in a utopian society where robots are doing all the farming and the work and the building and all of the stuff, and we just live a vocational life of pleasure.
I mean, I'm up for that. We just get given a living wage from the government, and we can go and do whatever creative endeavours we want without the financial restraints. Exactly. I mean, bring it on. Will I still be here? I might catch the end of that one. I
think I'll miss that. My kids might enjoy it if it all turns out successfully. But that's the problem, is I think that is 50 years away, given the current state of development with robots and AI. And it's now this transitional period, this industrial revolution from now until then, that's going to be the tricky part to navigate. Very much like the Industrial Revolution back then, when machines started taking factory jobs. This is that next revolution. Yeah. I suppose the last mini revolution was the internet. You're probably just about old enough to know prior to the internet, or at least dial up.
I remember getting our first dial up. Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember not even having a mobile phone when I was first in business, and I certainly remember pre-internet. So the internet was a sort of mini revolution in itself, and in a mini industrial revolution. The next industrial revolution is robotics and AI. And then the amalgamation of those two things together is going to be something very, very significant. And how that plays out, no one really knows. And whether that leads to a complete destruction or complete utopia is the big question, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty is in that, like you said, the transition period is constantly, and I was having this conversation with one of my photographers this morning, constantly adapting your business
to keep it afloat, like constantly going, well, do you know what? The tide's going this way. We need to move with it, because otherwise we'll be one of those people who sat there all bitter and resentful going, it used to be like this in the good old days. And it's like, well, you've just got to move with the times and keep
you've just got to move. And it is sad. And I do feel because I still miss the days of shooting 5x4-inch film and looking at them on a light box with the loop, or telling a client that they got to wait 3 days now till they can see the images because they got to be E6 processed. I miss those days, but we had to move with the times. Photoshop came along. I think I was using the very early iterations of Photoshop, and everyone in photography feared the industry that was going to collapse because there was this new software that could change images. Then stock imagery came along, and that made photographers worry. Then CGI and computer modeling came along, but we're still here and we're still shooting, but it has got tougher. But I think currently AI is a greater threat to photographers and other industries than anything we've seen before.
Yeah, I agree.
How we handle or manage that, I don't know. But I don't think we'll be the only casualties. That's what I'm getting at. The problem is, what else do you do? When I've been 30 years, nearly my entire adult life in this industry, what else do you do?
I'm going to go on OnlyFans. That's my option. I'm going to...
I don't think I'd do very well on OnlyFans.
I'm not convinced I would either. But you got to try something. There'll be a lot of people with nothing to do, so there might be an uptake in demand.
I enjoy filming. Recently made a documentary, but it was a huge amount of work, and it's a very long process. It's not something that I could see as being financially viable as a business to step into immediately. I don't know. I think, but I mean, who knows? I mean, it's funny though. I mean, even during COVID, I heard some stories of some very, very well-known photographers having to completely go and do a different job.
Yeah.
Because there was no revenue for anyone, obviously, during COVID. And there was obviously a slow uptake to getting back into, mixing with people in photography. And some photographers that I heard were actually doing completely different jobs altogether just to have some revenue.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who went and did delivery driving. Yeah, especially the wedding photographers. They were like, oh, great. Not only do we have no weddings being booked, we're refunding people whose weddings aren't happening.
Yeah. And then no weddings for the long-term foreseeable future either, because everyone just puts it off, and travel became so much more complicated and difficult that, I wish I could have some good news. I suppose if I was going to try and put a positive spin on this, I think real people photography will still exist.
Yeah.
Because even though you can go and put your mugshot into an AI and say, hey, make me a business portrait of myself, or make me stand here and look like this, it's not really authentic. It's not very believable. So I think wedding photographers will be fine. Portrait photographers will be fine. People want the real photo of themselves and their kids. I don't want an AI created image of my kids. It's not my real kids. It's make believe kids. Even if it looks like my kids, it wouldn't be my kids. So I think that part of photography will survive. And I think even in the business sector, where businesses want their real staff photographed on location doing what they do, and those type of things, that will survive. But there will be some elements in like mid-level product photography or mid-level stuff where the client could probably describe it to AI and get an okay enough result and figure that they're not going to have to spend any money, that part, the mid-level, might go. The top level probably will stay unless AI became just incredible at doing everything, because the top level requires a certain level, higher level of nuance and understanding of a brief that AI doesn't deliver. So it's difficult to know, but I think anything that involves real people and the requirement for real faces and real personalities and portraiture and that sort of stuff, that will survive. May even get stronger. There may even be a pushback against AI where people go, I don't want to look at AI images. I don't like that sickly, dreamlike sort of fantasy world.
Yeah, it has a look, doesn't it? There's definitely a look.
There is a look.
As soon as you see it, like, that's AI. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, we're having a good chat here about the realities of what may or may not happen. And, I don't know for sure, and neither do you, and neither does anyone else. It's an ever evolving thing.
I mean, my positive slant that I keep telling to the people I know in the industry is just remember, most people are going to go bankrupt, and on the other side of it, there'll be less competition. Like, if you can stay afloat through this period, on the other side, we'll be winning. So do whatever you have to do to keep your foot in the door. And once whatever happens has happened, there won't be as many of us, which is a bit dark, but that's how business works, isn't it? That's how all business works. I mean, at the end of the day, business, at the very fundamental level, business comes down to two things: supply and demand. Yeah. And if there's too many suppliers, someone's going out of business. If there's not enough demand, someone's going out of business. Supply and demand is everything in business. And I think anyone who's in business. So going back to what you said earlier about when you started your business, you took a loan out for the studio. When I started mine, I didn't take a loan out because it was just after the financial crash, and people who hadn't finished paying back their astronomical loans were going out of business, or they were selling their equipment that was still financed to make the payments for it. So I had a very different start into the business. Everyone was like, do not spend anything. Like, just get the cheapest kit you can get, because the industry's ruined. And this was 2009. I was like, it's over. Photography's finished. I was like, oh, great. I've just started. Brilliant timing.
At least you picked up some good deals.
Oh, yeah. I've not bought anything brand new in my studio ever. I get everything. It's quite depressing, but I'll be like, the studio's just gone bankrupt. So we got all the Broncolor gear from Wilco's. Do you remember Wilco's? They went bankrupt. They just bought all brand new Broncolor kit a few weeks before they went bust. So I went to the auction house and we got it all. Which is kind of dark. It's like, grave robbing a little bit. But
it is what it is. That's, you started your business at that time and you'd committed to it. You had the disadvantage of it was a difficult trading time, but then you had some other advantages of the fact that you were able to purchase this equipment. I remember when I first started my studio here, I had to take out quite a significant bank loan. I purchased at that time, it was all Elinchrom, and I had a few 101 packs, I think they were, and heads, and had to buy all the soft boxes and modifiers and reflectors and everything. And I had a 5-point Sinar P2, I think it was 5x4
they're nice,
camera. Mamiya RZ67s, my Canon gear that I already owned from my journalism days. And then I had to get studio space, and I had to take a significant loan, and took several years to pay that down and pay it off. And then gradually, and also when I started, I was in a tiny little studio. I mean, I kind of look at that now and I think, how the hell did I manage to work in that space? Right? And then I moved to a slightly bigger studio, and then as the clients grew and the business evolved, a bigger one. And we're in a massive studio now. We've been here 10 years. We can do car photography and anything in here, but I don't need a studio this big for my personal commercial photography work. I could have a studio half this size for what I normally do. But because of the education business, and because like when we do a shoot now, it's not only the shoot, but you've got then a film crew that are stepped back from the shoot that have to film you. You need a bit more space for that as well. So that's why we've got the larger studio, and then the offices upstairs here. But there's no way I would have this studio size that I'm running at the moment if I was just purely doing my commercial photography. One, because this is more expensive, this size, and the space would be wasted if it was just purely my normal commercial work. A lot of my work, product photography, is stuff the size of a lipstick or a sunglasses, or you don't need 4,000 square foot for that. you know.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just hitting the same issue with filming content in my studio, because my studio is built for shooting photos in, and like you say, you need that step back to film the filming of the photos. We've got like a video guy standing on the sofa, which is far from professional and ideal, but you know, we make do for now during these difficult times, I guess. But I mean, if you hadn't have taken a loan out and you'd have done, I don't know what year this was, but my approach of slowly starting from nothing and building stuff as you gradually went along, how long would it have taken you to get up and running? Do you reckon?
Well, I already had all my 35, so I had quite a suite of 35mm gear that I collected from photojournalism. So I had all the 35mm cameras. I had to loan for studio lighting and some medium and large format cameras. And it took me about 3 years to pay that loan down, which was quite good because the business picked up quite well. And I got quite a lot of new clients in quite quickly. I was very thorough and proactive in my marketing. So I saw a gap in the market. I thought, right, no one's servicing them really well. The shots I'm seeing that they're using aren't up to the scratch I would do them. So I decided the marketing was really important. And I produced some really high quality brochures of my work that showed the type of industries that I was targeting. And I did a huge mail shot campaign with these brochures to all the businesses within the Channel Islands and some in the UK as well, with a covering letter asking if I could have a meeting with them to discuss their requirements, or suggesting that we could deliver better imagery and why that's important. A lot of time I did a lot of speculative work for companies. So I would see the work that they had at the moment. I would get their product and I would shoot a better shot than they were currently publishing. And I would send it to them. I said, you can use that one for free. That's yours. But I would really like you to keep me in mind for your next commission, because I believe what we can deliver is better than what you're getting at the moment. And I believe we can do it for the same price, if not maybe just a little bit more, but you'll get a much better service. And I got a lot of work in. So I was really, really thorough on my marketing and my tenacity, if you like, with that marketing. And so the business grew and I was able to pay down those loans for equipment. So they were just loans for equipment. And then once the equipment was paid off, then you're back into just your own revenue. And I've never owned a studio space. So unlike maybe Jonathan Knowles in London, I think he owns his own studio, and maybe Tim Flack. I've always rented studio spaces. So you've always got your rent. But I always also do my spreadsheets and my budgets, and I work out the business side of things. So a very simple spreadsheet with your outgoings, your electricity, your phone bills, your internet costs, your administration, and of course your own wages. How much do you want to earn? Don't forget to put that in, because if you end up doing it all but not paying yourself enough, then you might as well go and get a job somewhere that is going to pay you and not have all the stress of working for yourself. So build a spreadsheet that details all of these costs of outgoings, etc. So you know entirely what 1 year will cost you. So how much is it going to cost me to be in business for 1 year? And then from that, you can calculate how many jobs do I need to get in? How much revenue do I need to get in? Then divide that by 52 weeks, divide it by an hourly rate, considering the fact that you're only going to be working about 30% of the week on actual shoots, because the other 30% is going to be phone calls, admin, marketing. The other 30% is going to be preparation and sorting stuff out and bits and bobs. And then figure out, well, based on that 30% of available time, what is my hourly rate need to be to make that amount of money? So I always worked on that formula of not guessing, oh, I'd love to be a photographer and let's hope I get this amount of work. I always knew exactly how much work I needed to get and what the hourly rate would need to be to do it. Was that hourly rate too little? Could I charge more than that? Could I make more than this? Because you want to look at that spreadsheet and go, not only can I meet that figure, but I can make X amount of thousands on top as profit left over as well. and you need a little bit of rainy day fund for future investment equipment, etc., etc. So I always ran it on from a very business focused point of view. And I would say that I was kind of successful in, if you count success as were you making a profit each year, I was making a profit each year to a decent profit within 3 years of starting my own commercial studio. And then the business and the clients grew, my rates grew, and it was all good up until that point that I mentioned, where I then became sick of the type of work I was doing. And I got to that point where I'm not enjoying this anymore. I wasn't getting enough of the big campaign shoots that I really wanted. I was getting a few, but not enough. And I was doing too much of that sort of grindy type work that you don't really like. And I was just, as I said, it was just fortunate that that was at the same time when we started the education business. Had we not started the education business, would I have carried on? Possibly not. Would I have emigrated to Australia to try a new approach? Quite possibly, because I investigated that. Would I be doing something else altogether different now? Possibly, but what would it be? I have no idea. So a little bit of luck, I guess, a little bit of fortune, a little bit of hard work. I'm also an advocate for the fact that, a little bit of luck, but often you make your own luck as well.
Perhaps, yeah. So, I had a major falling out with a long-time friend many moons ago. We've never spoken since because they said that I was lucky. And I lost my temper, something biblical.
Yeah. And I don't blame you. No one is ever just, unless you win Euro Millions, or unless you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and a massive trust fund, people like you and me are never lucky. I mean, when I was younger, I had no money whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to earn enough money to buy my first camera equipment. I was working as a painter and decorator part-time. I was working in the camera store that we mentioned, and I was working as a barman some evenings as well. I had no money. I didn't come from money, never had any money. So I worked to make as much as I possibly could. And, I've done well now with my business and other business interests. But I'm not one of these people, and I'm sure you're not either, that was just gifted. Oh, here you go. Here's $100,000 to get you started, or where, it's never been like that. But I like that because I value hard work. I value entrepreneurialism, and I value a pragmatic and logical approach to business, and making sure you know the requirements and the objectives.
Yes, yeah, and I think like one of the big things, I mean, it's similar to you, like my dad worked in a factory for minimum wage, so we had nothing growing up. And I think people, and it'll be the same with you, they look at you in your studio with all your fancy lights and your fancy camera, and they go, it's all right for you, you've got all of that. And it's like, but 20 years ago I didn't, or, however many years ago, so I didn't have any of this stuff. When I had my first...
I get that, and I bet you get that regularly, because one of the things that actually bugs me is a lot of people say, oh, you can only do that because you've got all that fancy equipment, all that fancy studio space, and blah, blah, blah. And what they should be saying is you can only do that as quickly as you do that because you've got all that fancy space. And because I could do exactly what I do if you gave me a 6-year-old Sony 35mm camera and you gave me a bunch of speed lights. It would take me days longer to do it, but I could do exactly the same shot. Yeah. So its efficiency is what I've got from the equipment I've got. The stuff that I create and make is from what's in here, not from the kit and the
absolutely.
Tools. The tools are obviously amazing and fantastic to have. And the other problem with that conversation that people, put forwards like that is they don't realize the 30-year journey it took to get to this position right now. Because I started taking pictures in the dining or a room in my flat to begin with. And then I got my first studio, which I isn't actually much bigger than my office is, right? So, I started with very minimal kit and minimal stuff to begin with. Yes, I bought some equipment and then eventually got a studio, but that was my risk that I took based on my research and my confidence in my ability. If you're not willing to take that risk and do it, then don't begrudge someone who has.
No, absolutely. And I'd say that, I was looking back through, because I speak to my accountant regularly, because the joys of my accountant is she doesn't understand my industry at all. Which is an absolute blessing, because a few years ago, she's like, why do you do these jobs here for these paychecks? I was like, oh, they're good jobs. And she went, no, they're not. You'd have to do, it was something else like, you have to do 500 of these to equate to one of this. And I was like, yeah, we won't be doing those anymore. That's the end of that.
That's like that 80-20 rule, isn't it? It's like where you need to evaluate where the majority of your business comes from. And it's good for any business to do that, is to actually look and say, well, which clients take up the most time but generate not that much revenue? And if I just binned those off and freed up that time and then focused more on these clients, you could potentially be more profitable. But business isn't easy.
No, and when I came into it, I did not have the approach you had. I started photography, leaving my day job with no savings and having just spent my month's paycheck. And I took on a studio rental space, and I couldn't afford lights, so I'd got speed lights, and we got free electricity. So we had a wall of AA chargers running through the night with all the speed light batteries on it. And I just hoped and prayed for the best. And it wasn't until probably 2016 that I went, hang on a minute, you've been blindly going through this, and it just happens to have worked out so far. Let's put a plan together. And now every Friday the spreadsheets come out, and we've worked out now that we do 3 shoots a year, and that's it. And if the shoot's worth less than a certain figure, it's logistically and financially not worth doing, unless they happen to be one of the clients that brings in the bigger jobs. So I don't know, say Adam and Eve come along with a small shoot, or Ogilvy. It's like, yes, we'll do that, absolutely. But it's not for the shoot, it's for the networking.
But it's for the future work.
If some small agency comes in with a small job, it's just a hard no. And it's really difficult for me to go, oh, there's 10 grand though. And my accountant's like, the time you're going to spend to make that 10 grand, you'd be better off marketing towards these people here who've got 250 grand. Yeah. It was such a weird mindset for me to go, but 10 grand is a lot of money. Yeah. I'd like 10 grand. She's like, yeah, but leave the 10 grand. Focus on that.
It's all relative, like you say, because 10 grand sounds like a nice figure, but if 10 grand turns into 40 days work,
exactly, and it always does.
Then what I mean, even if it turned into 30 days, 30. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a calculator here. But if it was 10,000 and you divided it by 30 days, then you'll be paying £300 a day. You'd be charging.
Yeah, so and that's what my assistant gets paid. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So you have to realistically evaluate these situations as you're doing. And yes, you're right in that there might be a 10 grand job that you should do that one because they are also the same people that provide the 100 grand job or whatever, But you know that you'd evaluate it to suit. I operate in a similar way on many of the stuff I do. I mean, I won't accept anything that's obviously less than a day. So we have a minimum is a day rate.
Half days is such a
yeah. So we have pre-production rates. So anything that needs doing before a shoot, finding props, meetings, admin, briefs, mood boards, sourcing things, that's all charged pre-production rates, which are half of our actual shooting rate. Then we have the shooting day rate, which will be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, depending how big the project is. Then we have post-production rates, which are the same as pre-production rates, which are half our thing. So that's post-production time, clean up, sort out, retouching, whatever, boom, boom, boom. And then usage fees as and where appropriate on the project. And that's about it. But any small sort of clients, come along. Obviously, like I said, oh, we need like 6 business portraits taken, then it's a no now from us, because it takes so long to set that up, test it, get it right for the fee that they're willing to pay for it. It's not feasible. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like portraiture. In many ways, I really love portraiture. I mean, if I had endless sums of money, I would take my Hasselblad X2D with a 90mm lens, and I would travel around strange countries just taking pictures of people, nice portraits with a little bit of maybe some sort of monopack of lighting, simple single light, so I can use a bit of flash, and shooting people on location in whatever they're doing, and showing people's lifestyles in sort of almost a cultural sense, almost a sort of photojournalistic sense, but with a little bit of a studio tinge to it as well, by having almost a sort of studio on location. I would love to do that, because I do love the essence of capturing people's emotions and faces and feelings, and how that can be conveyed in an image, and how that can connect with the viewer. But of course, we don't get paid for that.
It's interesting because I regularly have this conversation with my partner, and we ask you, she's like, what would you be doing if you were independently wealthy? And I was like, I would take comedic portraits of people. And she's like, why comedic? Not? Yeah, like just funny photographs, not serious, like Annie Leibovitz style, like silly photographs. I make little silly films by myself, like not like acting in films, like little short stories, like 30-second, 60-second films. I like to make them a bit of comedy in them, like at least my like dark humor at least. I was like, I want to do that. That's what I'd do. She's like, well, why don't you do it? I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to make money from it. She was like, well, go and find a way you can make money from it and then apply it to it. And that's why we shot the new portrait portfolio. I was like, I want to create silly photographs, different photographs in like a pop art style. That's what I'd be doing. And lo and behold, I now get more inquiries for doing the thing that I'd do if I was independently wealthy, from the most obscure places. Like, we got 2 fast food inquiries straight away from major ad campaigns. And then we've got one for next year, which I can't say too much about, which is a massive campaign, which is purely based off the work I produced with the mindset that this is what I'd do if I didn't have to make money.
Do you think that is a derivative of the passion, though? Because your passion may have come through.
I think so. And I think obviously my portraits, they're not the greatest portraits in the world, because I didn't shoot a portrait for over a decade, and it was quite exhausting the first time doing it after a decade of going, let's leave people alone. But the pictures, I would say, are as good as my still life work, despite the fact I hadn't done it for a decade, because I was so heavily emotionally invested in what I was shooting. And although I was knackered afterwards, I had such a good time doing it.
I mean, if I was independently wealthy, I think documentary making, I really enjoyed making the documentary that we recently made that was on the BBC. And I enjoy underwater filming. So underwater cinematography, filming either nature underwater or shipwrecks or whatever underwater, that has a big appeal to me. And I do that as a passion project anyway, like the recent documentary. So I'd probably do more of that. But I think I would actually do more portrait photography, as I just described, that in that style, because there's something about it that I find very appealing. But of course, the reality is that neither of those things are going to pay for my staff and rent and revenue, etc. So that unfortunately it isn't really feasible.
Oh, well, maybe in retirement it can be your because I worry about retirement. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do all day? What am I going to do between waking up and going to bed? I'll probably just keep coming to work, but without clients.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing when you're self-employed, when you think about retirement, because I think I will certainly, in 10 years' time, probably step back a little bit and take it a bit easier, and the education business can, run itself potentially, even if it even still exists, given what developments there are in the industry in future. But I have some other business interests separate to this, completely separate from photography, that have evolved as well. But if I could come to work and still take pictures, I would want to, because it's what I do, it's what I love doing. So I would still have that inspiration and passion to do it. So I think for me, retirement really comes down to how lucky you are with your health and how physically able you are, because you can be 75 and really quite poorly, or you can be a very fit 75-year-old and still completely mobile and active. And that, unfortunately, is going to dictate what your ability to enjoy yourself and do what you want, really.
Yeah, massively so. It's something I've recently started training differently, not now for fitness, but now for, will I be able to still climb a flight of stairs at 75? So much more functional work. Super. So just to end this on, what would you say, I don't know if this is a good question or not, actually. We'll find out in a second. What would you say is the biggest misconception people have about you? Do you find there's a major people think of you in a certain way, and you're just
well, I mean, possibly that person? there might be a few. Possibly the one we spoke on earlier is that you're just this super wealthy photography with this massive studio and Hasselblad cameras and lighting and all of that, and that's what you've always been. So that may be a misconception. I don't know. It's. I think one of the other misconceptions is people don't realize, and it'd be the same for anyone, even like yourself, is they don't realize how hard you have to work to get stuff done, to do stuff. It's not like you just sat here and it's all just happening. It's not like that at all. There's a ton of things that need to happen to keep the thing moving. Other misconceptions are, I don't know how well people know me. I mean, it's like one of those things. Obviously, I've been around on YouTube for years, and with the education platform, people feel they know you because they see you, but they don't know what you're like with your kids or your wife, family, or what pets you have, or what your lifestyle is generally like. They don't know what really your my personality is a little bit on the I'm very adrenaline driven. I do stuff that is always quite dangerous, like deep sea diving, motorcycle racing, and stuff that probably my insurance company aren't very happy about. Because I've always, and it's also a little bit like that with business as well, is that it's sometimes it's the adrenaline of running a business and entrepreneurialism and that sort of thing that I find quite exciting. Maybe it's risk, risk reward. So there is certainly a side of my personality that is quite addicted to the risk reward process, and some of those risks are beyond just calculated. They're physical risks in some of the things that I tend to do, but it's what keeps me alive and keeps me ticking. And it's how I operate and how I enjoy. Also, there's many things I've done in business that have failed miserably. So it's not always successes.
Yeah.
But I've always, and it sounds a cliche, but I've always learned from those failures, because you do something, I try this, I've tried that, I tried to make that work. It failed. I lost a load of money. So what can you gain from that? You look at it, you analyze it, you think about why, and you figure it out so that it's better next time round, or it's different next time round, etc. And that ability to be willing to take some form of risk. One of the, and this goes back to photographers as well. Sorry if I'm rambling on here, but
no, please.
A lot of photographers, they often don't try to do a certain image for the fear of getting it wrong, or the fear of failure, or the fear of not being able to do it and then being dissatisfied with their ability or performance. I'm completely the other way. Do it, see what happens, and if it's a disaster, understand why, and then do it again and again and again. And failure is the best teacher. That is an old cliche, but failure is the best learning tool. And practice by doing, although we teach people and educate people on techniques and ways of doing things, you still have to do them. You've got to try them and do it to learn from the experience of the physical movements and the difficulties associated with doing something. You've just got to do it.
Yeah, I think definitely like people assume that they'll probably assume about you like, oh, you started an education platform, it was a success. You did a photography business, it was a success. And it's the same with me. I've got those 2 successes and one other business interest, but I reckon I've had 20 failed businesses. Like in various guises, like, we set up a headshot service. Yeah, that went badly. And like I was selling physical products online. That did not work out for me. Like there's all these things that go, and I was like, I can't get to the post office on time every day because I have another business which makes me late for it. I can't sell physical items without having staff. And to do that, I have to take a loan. And to do that, I don't want to risk. Like, there's so many failings that people don't see.
But it sounds like you're quite entrepreneurial because you're looking for ways, as you should, regardless of your business. You're just looking for ways that your business or associated businesses can generate revenue.
Yeah, well, I don't have a backup plan, so I've got to. There's no there's no big inheritance coming my way later on, so I'm just like, right, I need to make as much money as I can. Let's do what we can do. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, and the big thing with things that don't work, which I learned a little bit too late, is abort them as soon as you think it's not working. Like quitting is one of the skills that people, and everyone's like, stick with it. I was like, no, do not stick with it. It's a sinking ship. Get off. Move on to the next thing.
There are certainly times where it's better to bail than continue. But So I don't know. I think that misconceptions wise, people always see you in the way that they might see someone they know from TV or whatever, but they know nothing really deeply about their personality. A lot of people, I know some people, based on commentary on YouTube, find my approach to educating people as being somewhat arrogant sometimes, as if because I said this is how it should be done, their argument is, well, what do you know? Why do you think you're so blah, 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 blah. And then maybe it's because the way I explain it is because I'm very, locked in on focusing, but it's also because I have the experience and knowledge of knowing because I've done it 1,000 times. So I get some pushback from people that might consider that my methodology might come across sometimes as being a little bit arrogant, but it's not really that. Well, I wouldn't say it was that because I certainly wouldn't mean to be. It's more that I'm just very focused on what I know works. And one of the really interesting things with photography and lighting, which is my specialty, is that lighting is based on physics. And if you know the physics, and you can't change physics, I'm afraid, if you know the physics, then you can learn lighting to the 12th degree. It's fundamentally physics.
Yes.
And you can't argue with physics. So, I've posted videos on YouTube showing how people were buying parabolic softboxes.
Yeah.
And so why are you buying these? Because that's a complete paradox what you're asking that tool to do. It's either a parabolic reflector that collimates light in straight lines to a point, or it diffuses light. As soon as you put a diffusion panel in front of a parabolic reflector, it no longer has any parabolic properties. So don't argue with me that, because you bought it, that it's somehow magically, mystically different to any other softbox. It is not, because the physics are physics. You cannot have light that comes out that was now diffused and still remains collimated. It's impossible. So, I sometimes have these conversations, but for some reason, some people that maybe have been in the industry for a couple of years. They've got that sort of learning curve where they think, they've done that, but they think they're up there somewhere. Who knows? I don't know, Scott. I honestly don't give a shit either.
No, there is that. I get a lot of those comments as well. It's like, it's not like that. It's like this. I'm like, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Although at first I did start Googling a lot of what they were saying. I was like, maybe I am wrong. And I've had to delete one video because what I said and what I thought was right was absolutely not. I was like, this is how it worked. And for some reason I'd heard it somewhere and the thing did work, but the rationale which explained why it worked that I understood was fundamentally incorrect. I don't know where I'd picked it up from. And I
certainly might be wrong on kit. People question me, oh, you sure that camera can do that? Or has it got that mode or whatever? Maybe. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't care. As long as it's got a shutter and an aperture and ISO, that's all that matters. But as I said, my expertise is in lighting. We did some really good example demonstrations just recently where I put down the Hasselblad, picked up a 7-year-old Sony 35mm camera with a standard 50mm lens on, got rid of the expensive lighting and switched it out for less expensive lighting and demoed exactly the same technique and the same result on a lower resolution camera with still the same image, the same end result, just to prove a point. But I find it frustrating sometimes that you have to prove that point because it should just be a known fact. It's
Oh, my girlfriend was on TV for a while, quite regularly, and she was absolutely mortified that I read the comment section on videos. She was like, "You don't ever read the comment section." I was like, "Watch, it's being online 101. Don't read the comments." And I was like, "Yeah, right. but I like to reply to people because they put the time into leave these comments." It's like, yeah, no, it's a hard no. Never read the comments. I was like, oh, okay. I
always read the comments on YouTube. I reply to a lot of the YouTube comments because a lot of them are quite, decent, reasonable, just wanting a bit more information. And I'm happy to give it where I can. And to be fair, 99% of people are absolutely fine and value and welcome what we do. You occasionally get some people that go, oh, this video was just an advert for your platform, and I say, yeah, it was, because occasionally we're allowed to put out an advert for what we do. We give you loads of free stuff, so occasionally expect some advertising in there. And what can I always just try and apply logic, honesty, and fact, and that's it. And if they can't deal with that, then more power to them. Let them do what they want.
Absolutely. I don't know, that's a good place to tie it up, actually. That's a nice, amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. It is greatly appreciated. And look forward to doing something like this again in the future. I just want to say another massive thank you to MPB for sponsoring this week's episode. MPB's platform is the place to buy used and to sell used camera gear. One of the easiest things you can do is just, you need to change systems. It happens now and again. Like, I've changed systems 3 times in my career. Just do it with one place. You send it in, you choose your new stuff. You get a better deal as well. If you send kit into the place you're getting it out from, you get a better deal than selling it for cash.
Yeah, and as you discovered, you don't get people sending you shoes in return for your kit.
Yes, quite. I've had a few cons on various other platforms where you can sell things, or websites where you can sell things, but MPB is a safe bet. Even if something isn't right when it turns up, their returns policy is brilliant. Because accidents happen, mistakes happen, and sometimes kit dies, and it just so happens to die 48 hours after you've received it. And I've had more brand new kit died than used kit. And one of the listeners to the YouTube channel got me onto this. It's called infant mortality.
I know, which is an awful phrase to use for electronics. It's a horrific phrase for that. But yeah, basically, it's like, but it works for cars, it works for electronics, or anything like that. It's probably going to break when it's new. And if it's been going for a certain amount of time, you're probably good. Yeah.
And I definitely say that's true with camera kit. I've had batteries, brand new batteries out of the box, not work. But, once you've had a battery for 6 months,
it's good to go until it's depleted.
Exactly. And it's the same with camera gear. And as everyone knows, I get my gear from MPB. That's where I get my cameras and my lenses, because I'm not paying full retail brand new price. I like to get that already devalued life going on.
I mean, look at some of the things we've looked at. How little some of this stuff costs. I mean, like £400 for a 5D Mark III.
I know.
That was a £4,000 camera.
Wasn't it £600 for a 1DX?
Yeah, which is just mental.
I know, and I hear and this is not financial advice, but I hear the arguments going, oh, it's tax deductible. Yeah, but I'd rather have more for my money, which is tax deductible, than the latest and greatest, which, let's be honest, in camera gear, for stills images, since 2005, the only real increase has been is autofocus, ISO, which in my line of work doesn't matter a bit. I don't know what my ISO settings are on my cameras, apart from they're at 100 all the time. And the quality you can get at that price point. So, for example, buying medium format back in the day was $100,000 investment. Yeah. Nowadays, it's a $5,000 investment. That I'm grateful for. But buy it used, it's a $2,000 investment. So I don't know. That's my life. That's how I like to do things. I won't show you now, but the crotch of these jeans has got. Rob, have a look down here.
I have no wish.
You see all my stitching? These jeans, I blew the gusset, but because of the sort of person I am, I had them repaired in the Japanese style where you get all the stitching over them.
I mean, well, that's now burnt into my retina. Can confirm there is a patch in his crotch.
There is indeed, and this is why we do not have an HR department over here. But there we go. Let's get back into the interview and hear what else Karl has to say.